Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Trauma-Informed Approach for the webinar. We are so pleased that you could join us. My name is Bonnie Zampino, and I'm the Engagement Specialist for Impaired Systems. Before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items so that you know how best to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. You are listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. We are eager for this to be as interactive as possible. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect those and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. In addition, we welcome you to join us throughout this conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag #StartsWithYou. I am very pleased to have with us today two very knowledgeable speakers. The first is Kim Sanders, President of Ukeru Systems. Kim has worked with children and adults with autism and other developmental disabilities for over 25 years. She served in a series of both hands-on and leadership roles. She is also a national and international advocate for moving towards a restraint-free environment. In addition, we are so pleased to have Karen Harvey, Assistant Executive Director, Clinical Supports for the ARC of Baltimore, joining us. Karen has worked in the field of intellectual disabilities for 25 years and is the author of multiple books, including one on trauma-informed behavioral interventions. Welcome, Karen. With that, I'll now hand the presentation over to Kim to get us started. Kim?
Thanks, Bonnie. We should probably start with talking a little bit about why we thought it was important to do this webinar. So often in the field, we see various webinars, especially these days, around trauma-informed care and trauma-informed approaches. And most of those webinars or articles that you may read are based around trauma-informed care for the client or the student or the individual being served. There's really not too much discussion happening about trauma-informed approaches for the professional. And we thought we should start that today. So to begin with, we need to talk about what does it mean to be a professional. The Webster's Dictionary defines professional as someone who does a job requiring a special skill, education, or training, who is a member of a profession, or a person who has a lot of experience or skill in a particular job or activity. So I would think for the majority of the people that are joining today, the vast majority, we're all professionals. We're professionals in the human services field. Some of us work at behavioral health care organizations. Some of us may work at hospitals. Some of us may work at schools, juvenile detention facilities, and the list goes on. But what does it really mean in our field to be a professional? Well, sometimes I think it feels like that along with being a professional, we have to have these superpowers that mean we have to be able to control our every emotion. Sometimes it feels like we may be asked to act like robots. And then with that, we're put in very stressful situations often with the people that we're serving. So I'd ask you to take a look at this e-card and ask if this hits home for anyone. Because there are just some days that we come to work and we face these stressful situations that we're in, but we have to sort of push down our emotions or our responses because we're professionals. I would ask, you know, if you think about how often is this discussed? I think it's just a given. You know, I can just talk about my experiences. We hire direct care staff. We train them. We have an amazing training program. They go to work. and they're faced with extremely stressful situations, and I think we don't do a good enough job of really explaining to them how they should respond in those situations in order not only to make sure that the people that we're serving are taken care of and receive the best treatment possible, but how to take care of ourselves, how to take care of themselves. So there's an expectation that I don't think that we can ever lose sight of. Of course, we cannot say that, oh, just because you're in a stressful situation that you can just act however you want to. There has to always be this higher level of expectation because we are people working with people. But at the exact same time, there has to be a different level of understanding because we're people working with people. And so for the rest of the webinar, we're really going to talk about what we bring to our jobs, what we bring to those situations, and then how we can make sure that we're taking care of ourselves.
Okay, so let's just talk about this a little bit. Again, it starts with sort of getting real and starting this dialogue. You know, I would challenge folks on the phone to start this dialogue in your own organization. That while the work that we're doing is super rewarding, the bottom line is that it's difficult. And in many cases, it's not like other jobs or other work experiences. The other thing we're going to talk a little bit about is understanding what we bring to the situation or what we bring to work every day. And I'm talking about our own experiences and sort of the baggage that we all bring. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that those types of experiences or traumas don't only exist for those we serve. So as a result, trauma-informed approaches shouldn't only be reserved for those we serve. And again, so often in the literature and in presentations that you may hear, it's all focused on how to create those approaches for clients or students or people served, which will always be important, but we have to look at this for everyone. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about causes and effects of trauma. So when you think, talk about the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there was a study that was done. It's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And basically it showed that childhood trauma increases the risk of many other things that can happen to you in your later life, actually not only emotional things that can happen, but physical things as well. So we're just going to walk through this. I found this study, I was introduced to it, and when I talked to a group of employees right here at Grafton about it, I think it was pretty eye-opening because it really talks about, you know, number one, when you walk into these doors, and again, many of you on the phone, regardless if you're a teacher in a school, if you work at a justice system, or if you work at a behavioral health care organization, these jobs are tough. But remember, many people are not talking about or even creating an awareness or being aware of what you bring to the situation. So we're just going to walk through these questions, and I would just ask you that if you can say after these 10 questions that your number would be a 0, the job is still demanding. But then put on top of that, what if your number is a 3? Or what if your number is a 4? So again, let's quickly go through these 10 areas. I'm just going to read a couple of them. Again, you can see them on the screen yourself. But prior to your 18th birthday, did a parent or an adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, humiliate you, act in a way that might make you afraid that you might be physically hurt, push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? If you had any of those things happen, that would be 1. Okay, so again, we'll just go through these. There's 10 of them total, 2 on that page. The next page, did you often or very often feel no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Did you ever not have enough to eat or have to wear dirty clothes or felt you had no one to protect you? Were your parents separated or divorced? Again, if you can say yes to any of those would all be ones. Was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or have things thrown at her, repeatedly hit, or threatened with a weapon? Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker, used drugs? Was there someone in your household with a mental illness or attempt suicide? Did a household member go to prison? So again, there's 10 questions there. Now I have to tell you, I think I had a pretty great childhood, but I have a couple ones myself. And so the question is, this study basically has about, 59 different publications from it, where they did studies to get people's number 1 through 10, and then look over the course of their life about things that both emotionally and physically happened to them. And some of the results I'm just going to run through fairly quickly here, but it's amazing how it can affect us later. And often when we step into these high stressful jobs, we meaning an individual employee, or we meaning the actual organization, we're not really being mindful of the situations that then we're placing people in and what that could result in. So again, adult alcoholism, you can see as your ACE score goes up, you have increased risk of becoming an alcoholic in your adult life. You can see that they have it broken out men and women here, but you can see as your ACE score goes up, you're at greater risk for depression. You can see as your ACE score goes up, you're at greater risk of perpetrating domestic violence. You can see as your ACE score goes up here, that there's a greater likelihood of impaired worker performance related to having financial problems actually performing your job, or a higher degree of absenteeism. And again, if we stop and think about this, it sort of all makes sense. In trauma-informed approaches, we often talk about recognizing what people have been through. And I just think it's time that we start recognizing what our workforce has been through and putting things in place to help them take care of themselves and to help take care of them. Okay, so the other thing that's really important is we can talk about, things that we brought with our history or in our childhood. But let's also talk about when you work at a behavioral health care facility, when you work at a public school, a juvenile detention center. Again, we can go on and on with the types of organizations that we all work for. But there are things that can happen within an organization that is traumatizing. So here's just listed a few. Oftentimes, I think because we are the adults and we are the professionals, that we don't give a lot of attention to, because we think people should just have to deal with it. So here, number one, injuries. Okay, so that one's pretty easy for people to understand, that our workforce can be traumatized if they're injured themselves or if they witness a coworker being injured. How about adverse media? Sometimes it can be the slightest thing that can happen and the media just latches on and goes after people. And sometimes that's really hard, especially given that we're working with people and we may feel that we're doing like amazing work and impacting people's lives in a positive way, and then to go home every night and see something negative in the media, or to have family members or friends constantly asking you about something that's been very negative in the media. That can be traumatizing. How about when your organization goes through financial crisis and then people start worrying about their jobs or the sustainability of the future career? Lack of resources can also be very difficult for people to manage. So do we have enough staff? Do we have enough money to buy the kinds of things that we need to do our jobs every day? And then finally, one other one that can really affect your workforce is reorganization. You know, I've known some organizations that tend to restructure every couple years, and it becomes a traumatizing event for people, because normally when those types of things happen, sometimes people lose their jobs or their positions, or things are moved around, and people that you have gotten really close with as coworkers, sometimes you don't get to work with them anymore, and that can be very hard for people. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Karen to further discuss the physiological impact of trauma, and most importantly, how to manage it in a professional setting. So Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be presenting with you, Kim. I really admire the work you do and the work all of you have done with the UCARU system. It's fantastic. So next slide for me then. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're fine.
All right, good. So moving along, if we could change slides. All right, thank you. So I don't know about you, but I'm completely triggered now by the ACE study, and I'm reliving my past, and I'm having a problem. Only kidding. But it can be, I don't think there's probably one person who has a 0. I mean, we all know there's so much hard stuff on planet Earth, right? And the most important thing is that we know ourselves. Like Socrates said, know thyself. That's really where we have to start and what we come back to. When we're working as professionals in this field of human services, we are our most important instrument. You know, what we do, how we respond, how we interact, that's our greatest tool. So understanding ourselves becomes everything. So we can use our tool of ourself in the best possible way. So understanding our brain doesn't look like this, but it's a nice model, the triune brain, and it kind of epitomizes our evolution. You know, we have 3 aspects to our brain. The first aspect is like that reptilian brain, like a lizard that just responds. You know, it's what keeps our heart beating, what keeps us going, even though it's not the thinking part of our brain or the responding part of our brain. It tells the system to respond, so it keeps your heart going. Like a lizard, it, you know, maybe sits out on a rock, starts to rain, goes under a rock, eats a fly, you know, pretty simple. Then we go to the limbic system, and that's pretty much our animal brain. We needed this part of our brain to survive in the jungle, right? This was our survival brain. So let's say we're a bunch of antelopes and we're eating grass, having a good time, and all of a sudden a big furry lion starts running towards us. If we've never seen a lion, we're like, wow, what's that furry thing, right? And then all of a sudden the lion jumps on our friend George and tears him apart and eats him. Oh no, then what do we do as antelopes? We run. There's a part of our brain that takes a picture of that furry lion and remembers it as dangerous. And many of you have probably heard this. That's your amygdala, right? And when the amygdala flashes danger, then we know we have to respond. And that's when we respond to that with that fight, flight, or freeze response, right? So we've got this human part of our brain, the green part of our brain, which is our smart brain. This is the part that maybe if you like to punch the boss, I'm sure, hopefully there's nobody here who would ever have that thought, and hopefully we don't have people sitting together where there's a boss and a person who's thinking this secretly. I'm sure there isn't, and I certainly don't want to stir anything up. But maybe one time your boss has really ticked you off, and you just want to do something. But then the smart part of your brain says, remember the car note. Remember your rent or your mortgage. and you put that fist right back in your pocket and walk away. Yes, you all know what I'm talking about. So that smart part of our brain, that green part, is what makes us human, right? And that's where our executive functioning is, where we plan things and where we say, okay, when we get our paycheck, maybe I'm not going to go to Atlantic City, or let's see, where would you guys go? MGM, I saw that just being built up in D.C. Looks like fun. And blow the whole thing because I have bills and I have kids. So our smart part of our brain keeps us grounded, keeps us planning, keeps us, trying to be rational. But the yellow part, the animal brain, is what saves us when we're in danger. So guess what? When we think we're in danger, that neocortex, that smart part of the brain, goes offline. It goes to Hawaii. It's like, I'm out of here. You're on your own. Because you have to have everything it takes to respond to get out of danger. So in your yellow animal part of your brain, if something dangerous happens, you've got to respond. That's why you get flooded with all kinds of chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline that give you extra strength and power, and you're able to respond. So you may have seen articles here and there about a granny lifting up a car when the little 2-year-old was pinned under it, because that danger floods the brain with chemicals which give you all kinds of strength, and you can do anything at that point. So when the green brain, the smart brain, is offline, that means we're not thinking too rationally. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you are driving down 95, and I think I'm safe in saying 95 because we all probably are crossed somewhere in our state by 95, right, on the East Coast. Maybe some people on the West Coast have to substitute a different road, but let's say we're driving down the highway and a Walmart truck comes right up to you and starts to run you off the road into the guardrail, possibly into your demise, right? And you're getting cut off. That's not the time that you stop and say, what's that 1-800 number? I really want to report a bad driver. No, that's when you just take the wheel and you try to save yourself. You steer hard, and okay, let's say that you do save yourself and you pull over to the side of the road and you're like, oh my God, I just got almost killed. So maybe you're shaking, right? You're flooded with all kinds of chemicals. You're like just feeling this rush of what just happened. The only way you can calm yourself down is by activating your parasympathetic nervous system. Next slide. Let's see if that's on. No, it's not on the next slide. Okay. Let's go back to the brain for a minute. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. But the parasympathetic nervous system in that yellow area is what exists right next to our fight, flight, or freeze system. So the amygdala is telling you danger, and then the parasympathetic system is what tells you, okay, the danger is gone and you can calm down now. Your green part of your brain, your smart part of your brain, is still not there. So you're on the side of the road, you're still not calling Walmart to report that bad driver. You're trying to breathe, maybe you pray, or you chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, whatever you do, right? Or maybe you call, or if you're like me, you call up your husband and you say, I almost died. How would you feel if I died? I love to do that. Just to get him to say how much he would miss me. Or whatever it is that you do, you're still not thinking, what can I do rationally? You're still in recovery mode, right? So this is very important. The amygdala was triggered, it was flashing, and all you can do now is try to calm down. So maybe 3 weeks from now, when you are driving down the road and you see a Walmart truck, you might actually cross over 3 lanes to get away from that truck and not even know what you're doing or why you're doing it, but you suddenly feel urgently that you have to get away. That's because your amygdala is firing. The amygdala isn't always conscious. So you're crossing over into traffic, people are making all kinds of hand gestures at you, you've actually put yourself in more danger because your amygdala told you you were in danger. And that's what it's like to be triggered, right? So going back to the antelope, the next time they're out there, all of us antelopes are eating grass, hanging out, having a good time, and we see a furry lion, we are going to run right away because our amygdala is going to say, I know what that furry thing does. It eats people, or it eats antelopes, and we're going to run. So everybody has a different response to trauma, but we have to save ourselves. So it might be fighting back. Maybe if we're a bunch of gorillas, we'd fight back. Maybe if we're little anteaters, we'd play dead. And that will protect you because, you know, we're the only animals that will eat dead things because we figured out how to cook, which is so great. So this is the mechanism of trauma. Next slide. The amygdala is going to flash, and when the amygdala is flashing, it has a straight route to our smart brain. It shuts it down right away. So that's why you can't always talk yourself out of a panic mode, right? Let's say, have you ever had like a lot of anxiety about something and you know it's not rational? Like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired, even though you're not going to get fired, or oh no, we're not going to be able to pay the bills. Maybe that is rational, but you know, you're panicking way more than you should, and even though you try to calm yourself down with rational thoughts, they don't work. That's because the amygdala has a straight circuit to the smart brain, but the smart brain has a very weak circuit back to the amygdala. And when the amygdala is flashing, our hippocampus stops working, and that's our working memory. So we won't be able to reassure ourselves with past experiences in which everything is okay. We just have to get out of that triggered mode. Next slide. So we have that fight, flight, or freeze response. Janina Fisher says we also have our deeper issues come up. All the issues that Kim talked about with the ACE, whatever your ACE profile is, all those issues come up too, like maybe, oh my God, I'm going to be abandoned if you had experienced abandonment, or oh, I'm going to get abused if you had experienced physical abuse, or somebody's coming after me sexually if you've experienced sexual abuse. And all those childhood issues come up, as well as you're going to have a fight, flight, or freeze response. Now, here's where I want you to take a minute and think about yourself. Everybody has a different mode, right? So like we said, the antelope is going to run, the gorilla is going to fight, the little anteater is going to freeze and play dead. So I'm going to tell you about my family. I am a fleer. I like to get out of town, run, hide, get away. My brother is a fighter. Now, it got worse since he moved to New Jersey. No offense to anyone from New Jersey, but really, he has got 5 different lawyers on retention. He is ready to sue anybody for anything. He even threatened to sue me. I'm like, I am your sister. What are you thinking? But he's in constant fight mode. And then my husband is more inclined to freeze. So when he's traumatized, he kind of shuts down, right? Like his idea of trauma, I believe, is when I have a new home improvement project idea. And I start saying, I know we can knock this wall down, and it'll just open things up, and it'll look so good. And then he'll just freeze right in front of his computer, be glued to his email, like, I can't hear you. And I can't drag him away from that computer until I stop talking about home improvement. So, and I have, you know, my flight issue comes up whenever someone says these certain words to me, because these certain words are my trigger. So I had a boss who used to say, I need to talk to you. And every time he said, I need to talk to you, it then was followed by crazy screaming. What did you do? Why did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. He had a little anger management problem. So every time anyone says to me now, I need to talk to you, they can no longer find me. I am out of town. My current boss is actually my friend, and I love her dearly, But if she says to me, I need to talk to you, I'm like, well, I have sessions tomorrow. I have a meeting the day after, maybe next Friday. And then she can't find me for a good week. So let's think about all of us. And here's where I want you to decide, what is your mode? Do you fight? Do things get you to the point where you feel you have to defend yourself? When we fight, we're often not fighting to hurt anyone. Very rarely do people just want to hurt someone. More so, it's about defending yourself. The best defense is a good offense. When you're most threatened is when you might be most inclined to start an argument, because it's a trauma response. How about fleeing? Maybe you're like me, and you know how to hide or run. Or freezing, like my dear husband, who I hope will never hear this webinar. But he'll know what are the terrible things I say about him. You just shut down when you hear things you don't want to hear. So next slide, we can think about ourselves. So something happens in the present, and we might go back to traumas that happened in the past. So, you know, I've worked with people who had horrible trauma responses on the job. So my good friend who was in Iraq was triggered by an individual that he worked with, and he just saw red. And we had to fight very hard not to get him, to prevent him from being fired, because he was not rational. But then he had to get therapy because an individual poked him, and that triggered when he was touched in a very negative way, and saw people get killed afterwards. You know, all kinds of horrible things happened to him. So we have to know ourselves, know what triggers us, and maybe we need to be getting therapy, maybe we need to be actually working on ourselves. I myself have to kind of explain myself to people, you know, realizing that there's certain situations that we're touchy about. I had to tell all my bosses, well, I'm extremely sensitive, I overreact, and I'm neurotic. I'm sorry you hired me. It's your fault. You never asked the right questions in the interview. So we all have to know ourselves and be able to talk to people about our points. And when we have good relationships with our coworkers, we can support each other. When we don't feel safe with our coworkers, that actually creates more trauma. An interesting study was done with Iraq vets, and they said they looked at people who both went through the same trauma, like maybe their Humvee was blown up or their unit was attacked, and some developed severe PTSD, right? Some were completely unable when they got back to their normal lives to resume their normal life. They, you know, their marriages fell apart, they lost jobs or couldn't keep a job, maybe they went to drugs or alcohol, and others went through the same trauma but were able to somehow work past it, keep jobs, resume relationships. So they did a very involved study where they looked at what's the difference, and they found two factors. The two factors were, number one, people who had lots of friends and lots of family support, but mainly friends, were much less likely to develop post-traumatic stress disorder and be easily triggered. Even though they would get upset, they were able to calm themselves down. That network of support was their inoculation. That was number one. And they looked at everything. They looked at health, they looked at exercise, they looked at diet, they looked at all factors, but they found those relationships. And people who didn't have a lot of friends were much more likely to develop severe PTSD. So friendship heals. And the second thing that they found, the second factor that helped people to not have PTSD was whether or not they had a cohesive relationship in their unit. So was there harmony within the unit? Or did people have conflict? Were they worried that their other, unit members were going to stab them in the back? Or did they feel like they had each other's back? That was the second most important factor, because the people that were in a cohesive, harmonious unit felt much safer and were much less likely to develop PTSD. So those are the two factors, you know, your network of friends, family, support, and the cohesion with the people that you work with. So that's very relevant for us, isn't it? And the work we do in human services. So when we feel like there's someone out to get us, we can never feel safe, versus when we feel like we really like our coworkers and we have a good system of trust between us, you can really deal with a lot. The other thing is so important is to have friends, develop friendships. It's the inoculation against trauma, and it's what helps you to heal. Sorry about my phone. And next slide. Okay, and the slide after that. There we go. Thank you. So when we have these triggers and we feel ourselves going into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and we try to think rationally to calm ourselves down and it doesn't work, the most important thing that we can do is actually activate in that yellow part of the brain the cool down system. So the sympathetic nervous system is where we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and the amygdala goes crazy saying you're in danger. And the parasympathetic nervous system is what calms you down. That means walking away, getting away from whatever triggered you, going and talking to your safe person, calming yourself, breathing, and doing whatever self-care you need to do. I think it's important for administrators and managers and executives to understand that sometimes direct care professionals need to be able to say, I need to get away from this situation right now. And when they've been through something traumatic, I need to debrief. I need to be with somebody who's safe and talk about what just happened. Because we're still not in our rational part of our brain. It's like when we pulled over to the side of the road after the Walmart truck almost hit us. Right? We just can't calm down unless we just breathe, listen to ourselves and just go, okay, I'm going to be okay. We just calm ourselves. You may have some self-statements that work for you, like I'm okay, everything's okay, and you get away from the trigger. So that's important to know. Next slide. We have to take time for ourselves. The next thing I'd like to introduce is to pursue happiness. So this sounds like a small thing, but it's really, really big and really important. So an interesting study was done at Harvard University. It was over 75 years. Some of you may have heard of it. And they looked at 268 males over 75 years. They looked at really rich people, undergrads going to Harvard. And they looked at people who were very poor and had no resources and were really struggling. And they followed them throughout their life. And they looked at all the factors to see what would lead to happiness. You know, they looked at wealth. They looked at what kind of jobs they got. Did they have high-paying jobs? And they found the most important factor in happiness, the people who ended their life on the happiest note and who had the most fulfilling lives, were the people who had positive relationships. That was number one. And number two was being content with the kind of work they were doing. And in many cases, people that were much poorer and had less money were way happier than people with a lot of money but a lot of stress and not good relationships. So they looked at people who were married at 50, and if they reported it was a good marriage, then at 80, those people experienced less complaints about physical pain, even though they may have had the same medical disorders. They reported happiness on every level because they'd had these positive relationships and a sense of fulfillment in their work. That's one thing I think we all have in human services, knowing that we're making a difference. So I have a happiness assessment that we will be sending to you based on Martin Seligman's view of happiness. So he has written a series of books that are really helpful. And the last book is Flourishing, where he talks about 5 levels of happiness and the importance of being in the pursuit of happiness. That's what the Declaration of Independence says, right? We all have the right to pursue our happiness. And really the pursuit of happiness gets you out of the past. When you have a lot of trauma, the past is present. You're reliving those negative things over and over again. You're more easily triggered. But when you're focused on the future, then you're much less likely to be affected by past traumas, and you're more resilient to the things that are going on currently. So we all know if we have something really fun that we're looking forward to, let's say you have a vacation you planned and you're excited about it, or a day trip somewhere, you know, no matter what your boss says, it just kind of rolls off your back. Yeah. I know there's no bosses like that around here. But let's say you're back from the vacation, you're out of money, you're discouraged, and you feel like you have nothing to look forward to. Then that boss says that same nagging thing, and it can be a total trigger and make you just quit your job right on the spot. I'm done, I'm out of here. So we have to have the pursuit of happiness in our lives. So in order to recover from your trauma and in order to enjoy your work and your daily life, you should have a plan for how you pursue your happiness. So pleasure is the first level. It's a very passive level. Martin Seligman says you should have more engagement. Engagement is a more active level of happiness. Pleasure is like just hanging out, maybe eating the foods you like, watching the kind of TV you like, you know, the football game. I'm so happy it's football season again. I had no hope last year for the Ravens, but now we've got some hope. And the Redskins look good too. You know, we all have hope now, right? But when we're engaged, maybe doing something we love, like cooking, or actually I hate to cook, so that wouldn't apply to me. But everybody's different. Gardening, exercise, maybe love playing basketball, maybe like, you know, playing music, anything, dancing. Being engaged actually makes you happier than just passive happiness. So Martin Seligman says if your ratio of engagement to pleasure is higher in engagement and lower in just passive happiness, you're a more happy person. You're a happier person than if you have more passive, just like drinking beer, watching the game, or watching TV, but not much engagement in hobbies. You have less happiness overall. The next level, of course, is relationships. Like I said again, this is the most important thing in your life. You know, we all have friends that make us feel really good, but maybe we don't get together with them because they're just not in front of our face, and we're hanging out with the people that are easiest to hang out with, but maybe they're not the people you enjoy the most. Maybe they're getting on your nerves. I don't know. But we should really pursue being with those people that we love and enjoy to be with, even if it takes extra effort, because that's the most important thing, positive relationships. Next is a sense of achievement, feeling good about yourself. And, you know, we should lower our standards for ourselves. Most of us are too hard on ourselves. Hey, you made it through the day. Congratulations. Right there, you should have a sense of achievement. Some of our days are pretty rough, especially if you're a DSP. Wow, that's wonderful. You made it through the week. Congratulations. We need a sense of achievement in all things, and to be able to congratulate ourselves more. And Martin Seligman talks about the importance of celebrating ourselves. Something good happens, we're going to celebrate. However that celebration looks. Celebrate yourself. Celebrate your small achievements. Not just wait till you win the Nobel Prize, because that may be a long wait. But really celebrate yourself. And finally is a sense of meaning and purpose, which all of you have if you work in human services. But how can we enhance that? You know, maybe volunteer once a month somewhere. Whatever it is that gives your life a sense of meaning, Martin Seligman says that's actually the most important thing in enjoying your life, is having a sense of purpose and a sense of fulfillment. So we will be sending you the happiness assessment, where you can assess what makes you individually happy. And then, thank you, I would like you to fill out the happiness procedure, which is going to be attached to that, where you can make a plan for how to pursue your happiness. And that way you'll be more resilient to trauma. It inoculates you when you're looking forward to something. I myself love rock and roll. I have to know I'm going to a concert, even if it's 3 months from now. I have to know I've got tickets to something in my hand. Then I don't care what goes on because I can't wait for that concert. So know yourself. You may hate rock and roll. I don't know. So you decide what's going to make you happy, and you have to pursue it. You probably already are, but I don't think you can do it enough. We can all increase our level of happiness, and that will inoculate us in every way, shape, and form to the traumas we have endured, to the traumas we will endure, and to the effects of those traumas. We can become happier and happier by strengthening those 5 levels in our life. I hope that was good for you. I hope you enjoy that. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I just have a couple more slides here, and then at the end, hopefully we'll have a couple minutes to take some questions. Just wanted to go over a couple more things that organizations can do to really be able to say that they're using trauma-informed approaches with employees. So an organization can make sure they have practices in place and tools to increase safety, because number one, we can't be at our best if we're not safe first. And we have to get rid of that fear factor in order to do good work. The other thing is organizations can be transparent. Data, finances, strategic plans, these should not be top secret. They should be shared with anyone. If a person is worthy of working at your organization, then they should get a seat at the table to be able to see these kinds of things for the organization. We also want to make sure organizations are striving and doing their very best. No organization I've ever seen is perfect, but there has to be a sense that people in leadership of organizations are at least trying to do everything they can to provide adequate resources. And finally, an organization, I think, has a sense of responsibility to create an atmosphere of kindness and fun, especially in our field. Again, our former CEO used to always say that we cannot teach people to be kind, comforting, nurturing, and then beat them with a stick. You cannot expect a direct care staff to do all of those wonderful, compassionate things for the individuals we serve and then treat them terribly. So we have to have fun. We have to be kind. And I would also add, you have to laugh a lot. There's sometimes that on the most stressful day, the best thing that can happen is for a group of people to get together and just laugh. And then what can we do? What can you do? What can we do for ourselves? You know, be part of teams, a solution team. Don't be the victim. Don't allow yourself to feel powerless. You have way more power in making changes than you think. I'd say bring your best attitude. I think enthusiasm matters. The way you walk in your work every day and the attitude that you bring, it truly matters. Again, not only for the people that you're working with, but for yourself. And as Karen was talking about, know your limits. It's perfectly okay to say that you need to walk away or that you need a break. And there should be no shame in saying that I can't take Johnny anymore, that I really just need a break. That is much better than putting yourself in such a stressful situation that you know you're not going to be able to manage your own emotions. Take a break. And finally, what I would end with is, again, these jobs. And as Karen mentioned, especially the jobs of teachers, direct care professionals, clinicians, people who are working directly with individuals, especially if individuals have highly challenging behavior. Take care of each other. Look out for one another. If you see that your coworker is starting to lose their patience, help them. Look out for each other. Help them to take a break even when they're saying they don't need a break. Again, it's way too hard for us not to care about each other. So if people have questions, I see that in the question box here.
We do have a few questions, but I think we are running out of time. So what we'd like to do is respond to these questions at, after the call, and we'll make sure that we're able to facilitate that Q&A a bit offline. So we want to be sensitive to everyone's schedule, and we are pretty much at the conclusion of our time together. We'd like to thank both Kim Sanders and Karen for providing such great information for us today. And we'd like to thank everyone who was able to join us today in the discussion. We really hope that this is not the end of this dialogue, but really the beginning of this very important conversation. So we'd really love for you to stay in touch with us. Be sure to follow at Ukeru Systems on Twitter and use the hashtag #StartsWithYou on Twitter as well. And you can sign up for our newsletter, which comes out quarterly, and you can do that on our website. If you have any other questions, you are welcome to email us directly at info@ukerusystems.com. And if you have any other needs or you want any assistance in looking into this with more detail, we would love to talk to you. So on behalf of Ukeru Systems and our presenters, we'd like to thank you all once again for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.